Welcome everybody to our special Tana specific session here as we'll look into how you can set up a productivity system in Tana from just the very basic steps. So let me share a nice clean Tana screen here with you. This is our demo graph here, and that AP Productivity Demos graph showing up for everybody on your side there. Okay. And I can see some of you have joined into that, so we're there. Let me make it one size larger, just for the sake of that. It also makes where my notes are slightly larger, so that's an exciting, fun side effect of that. So let's just dive right in here. I want to start by creating the concept of a to-do in here. The most basic, most fundamental thing, let me head over to the today page for this here, and I actually may need to create a today page since I am in a new graph here. What's the quickest way to do that? I wonder if I create it like that. Well, yes, that'll do it for me. So now I'm on my today page here in this graph, and what I'm going to do is let's say I need to walk the dog. If I want to make this just a check, all I have to do is I'm on my Windows machine now, so I'm using Control, but I could use Command if I were on a Mac. So, and I hit Enter. Control Enter or Command Enter turns that into a check. And of course, if you're someone who's familiar with using Roam, continuing to cycle that Control or Command Enter will take you through the various states of not a check, check, and completed check as you do that. So if you only need just a list of reminder kind of things and you're not looking at the next level of what a to-do can be, you can just put a checkbox on things with Control or Command Enter, and it will cycle through those things. Let's imagine now, though, that I needed a little bit more detail. And this is very hard on my dog, but apparently I don't have a dog. Well, let's say I want to walk that dog on a scheduled date, and not every single day, just on a scheduled date. So the first thing that we need is some kind of a hashtag that will allow us to attach information to this node, which is what they're called in Tana, N-O-D-E. So if I want to attach information to this beyond just indenting underneath it, and this is the real where the power of Tana comes into play, I can create a hashtag, and we'll call that hashtag to do. And this one comes out of the box if you have your first graph. I'm starting another one here to demos, so you may not have to actually create to do, but that's what we have here. So I'm going to hit Control Enter or Command Enter to create that. And so now I've created a thing called to do. There's no further information in it yet, but we're about to get to that. Okay. So now this is a to do. I'm going to click on the configuration for it. So this is my to do. And I can click on configure. And now that I've done that, let's move this over to the side so you can see it side by side. It's a little better use of the screen space here. Come on now, go where I told you. Are you not going to do it for me? Okay, well, whatever. We'll move down here for it. So this to do doesn't have any default content in it yet. You'll notice I'm in the schema for the tag to do. We can put a nice little color on it. Let's make it a nice little green here. You can see that shows up that way. Down here, and this, I'm going to take this really slow because this is a really important step in Tana. Down here, we're going to create a field, and that field is going to be of a type date that allows us to schedule to-dos as they arise. So I'm going to hit the greater than sign with shift period here on the keyboard. Hitting that creates a new field, and we're going to start calling this due date, and you'll notice I don't even have to create that field because down here at the bottom, one of the system fields is due date. So we don't need to create due date. I can just click on that, and that comes out of the box. I now have due date. This allows me to add dates. And I'm going to leave that be for the moment here. I'm going to click out of this now. I'm in the schema here. I'm going to X out of schema, and that's going to take me back to our main page here. And you can see that it says walk the dog. And it just occurred to me, why let me put it on the side screen. because I've zoomed in so much that it doesn't think there's enough screen real estate for side by side. So that's I'm sure that's exactly it, because I know that certain places it won't let you do side by side. If I now come to this and hit either Command or Control, depending on what I'm on, down, you can see that now that information is waiting to be added to walk the dog. I've added to all to-dos, any to-do that may ever arise, the ability to capture a due date. Okay, so this due date here says this is brand new, by the by. If you hit space, it'll automatically insert today's date, but it will also give you the opportunity to choose from a date picker any future date that you might want to schedule this task for. For right now, let's choose tomorrow's date. And I'm just doing this with a mouse. There are some keyboard shortcuts to being able to manipulate these, but I'll keep it simple for the moment. So now, as you can see, walk the dog has a due date of tomorrow. Let's add a couple more to-dos here just for this. We'll say feed the cat. I have very angry animals around here. I just schedule these for, several days out. We'll make it a to-do. Now you'll notice having to-do as defined is already there. So I type to-do, I hit my Command or Control down, and let's also, for the sake of the demo here, show this as being available tomorrow, or not available, but scheduled for tomorrow. Okay, so now we have two to-dos, both of which have had a due date added for tomorrow. And any to-do that I add, if I tag it to do, is going to come along with that due date information, or it's not going to, be pre-scheduled, but it'll have the field available for me to do that. So let's go to tomorrow. I can do that up here at the top. You'll see if you're on one of the daily nodes, you'll have some extra information here at the top that'll allow you to go to the previous day, next day, or go to any specific date. So let's just go to next day, which, is tomorrow from here. And as we do that, you'll see already down here at the bottom, without my having to do anything up top, there are references. And it shows here, this day shows up as a due date for two of these to-dos, walk the dog and feed the cat. And you'll also notice, because they're references, you see that little dotted line around it? That little dotted line indicates that those are references coming from somewhere else. So I go to the back to the today date, you'll see where they're created, there is no dotted line around them. The halo, the little greenish halo, which greenish because I chose that color, but the halo indicates that there's more information to be found by using Control or Command down. You'll notice when it's open, that halo goes away, but when I close it up, that's telling me there's more to be found here, in this case, the due date. Okay, so let's go back to tomorrow. These are appearing as references here. Now, if you have nothing else on that day's page, it probably would be fairly easy for you to see these living down here in the linked references. But if as you go, you start adding more things to the day, you'll probably want to see these up top. So what we want to use in order to find the things that are for today is a search. We're going to use find nodes, which you can discover among many things in the command palette or the command list that they have here, command panel, whatever their term for it is here in Tana. If you're on a Mac, you'll use Command K. Here on the Windows machine, I will use Control K. And you'll notice the very first thing that comes up, there's a very extensive list of things that come up, but the very first is find nodes. That's what we're going to use here on the tomorrow page. Find nodes with the tag to do. And I'm going to stop there for a second so you can see that I can grab every single to-do with that. It won't tell you much because everything's scheduled for tomorrow right now. But we'll say every to-do is showing up here. And if I were to, let's say, come down here and add an additional to-do that's scheduled for, Friday, let's say run a marathon. We'll do that on Friday. Scheduling that for the 28th and doing that, you'll notice that that is still showing up in this query up top here, because I have not done anything other than say search for all to-dos. But I can adapt this query. I can go in here to this live query and I can say not just that I want to see to-dos, and notice what I did to do that, just so I don't jump past anything. I clicked on where it says live query. It says list with nodes tag to do. Live queries next to that. I clicked on that And opening that, I can now expand upon this query. I could have done this from find nodes as well, but I think it's useful to see both formats. From here, I'm going to say that I want to find not only to-dos, but to-dos that have a due date of this day, okay? So I'm actually going to start the same way I created the due date field in the to-do. I'm going to hit the greater than sign, which is shift period on the keyboard here. I'm going to look for things that are due date. Then specifically, I'm going to look for things that are due date of, I'm going to use the @ symbol here to call upon dates for tomorrow for this one. Okay, so now watch. Down here, I haven't run this yet. So down here, it still shows walk the dog, feed the cat, run a marathon. But only 2 of those are actually scheduled as due dates of today, or excuse me, tomorrow. When I click done, run a marathon should go away. It'll still show up at the bottom of the screen because I added it manually to this page, but it won't show up inside the query. Okay, and in fact, let's go inside the query so now you won't see it. And as you noticed, once I went inside the query, it went away. So the only things I'm seeing now are the things that are tagged for this particular due date. So let's change this name of this. Instead of saying list of those tagged to do, let's call this today's tasks. And now we have a query that says today's tasks that shows up on tomorrow's page in this particular case, and includes just those tasks that were scheduled for that date. Okay, so that's where we are so far. We've come through, we've created a to-do, we've added a due date field to it, and then we've discovered that we can use a search to aggregate, to pull together everything that is a to-do with that due date. Now, one more layer to this, and we'll have ourselves an agenda, and that is, you'll notice that at the top here, for the date, we have a tag that says day. Well, you remember I went in and I configured the to-do tag to have some additional things in it. Let me move here into the day tag and add some configuration to that. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to say configure the day page. I just clicked on it, normal clicking, and I'm going to configure it. And within this, I want that search that I just created on the tomorrow page directly to actually arrive every day. So that way I have a to-do search that I can set for that day. And I'm doing it that way because there are certain initialization things you can do, but one, they're a little complicated right now. And 2, I normally set my agenda the day before, so it's easier for me to just manually set the date. But we want the query to be there. So I don't have to do the whole query. I can just set the day and I'm good. Okay, so let's take this query that we just created up here. Okay, and I'll copy it. And maybe this may be maybe layering this in a way that's a little bit more difficult to do. Yeah, that's what I thought. Let me just recreate it. In fact, that's smart because I'll recreate it and show the other way of doing it. So from in here, I'm now in the day tag schema. I'm going to do the whole find, going to do it with the find nodes here. Okay. So we'll say Control K or Command K, find nodes with the tag to do. And then we're going to say with the field due date. And we'll use this day because that might pull this off for us, and we'll see if I don't have to do anything with it. Granted, I'll have to still update this day if I'm going to use tomorrow if I'm searching from tomorrow. But this will bring in, I'll open the query so you can see it, on every day, a to-do with the due date that matches the day. Now, hopefully, since it's matching a parent, hopefully this will work indefinitely, because if I'm on tomorrow's page, parent is tomorrow. So that should do the trick, and maybe I won't have to set it. I apologies for anything that I say that seems incongruent with things. Both my knowledge of Tana is young, and also Tana keeps changing real quick. So hopefully that all this matches up real easily here. We'll call this today's tasks. We'll leave this as it is here. And of course, there's nothing to show in that query, but we haven't put it on a day yet. Now, let's come up here. We've saved that as a today's tasks here. And actually, it's already up here working. It's up here above the line here. Anything above the line is happening on the day, and you can see it's already there and doing its thing. So that means that on Friday, if I go out to Friday, I should already have a today's task there waiting. You can see it comes along with the day. See if it's working. It says it should be matching the parent. It's not, but that's okay. This is what I do. This is what I do anyway. I come in on the day and I change it to the day that I'm on, and at that point, it will work. So whatever. I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong with the parent thing, but I would in this live query just make this empty for the moment, and that way, when you get to the day, you can make the adjustment. Okay. So when I get to Friday here now, I've made that adjustment, and that's that way. If I were to do it again from scratch, it'll automatically come back if you delete it because it's in the tag. I can live query due date. I'll insert, in this case, Friday because this is on the Fridays page. And that will narrow it down to the things that are happening on that day. Okay. So now, in addition to having created the to-do with the due date and querying that, we're now doing that in a systematic way. So when we arrive on the day, we can see that. Presumably that parent thing will work, but it isn't working for me right now. Now, Adam has just asked me a question in the chat here. Will the search pull tasks that didn't get completed the day prior? This one won't, but one will. Okay. I use here, that's a great question, and I'll go ahead and add it right now. So in the day tag, I'm going to find nodes. So this is Control or Command K, find nodes. And this only works because we've used a system tag for due date. But under to do, you'll actually find that there's one that says over due date. If you click on that one and then save that as a list, we can now create an overdue tasks, and that live query will include anything that is from previous days. And that works for me. It works for me if I have it set on tomorrow's page. I don't know about out on Friday's page, but it works for me when I put it on tomorrow's page. Let's see what it says here. It looks like on the Friday's page, it's not quite. It's not counting those yet. But when I'm setting up my tomorrow, that's exactly how I have my tomorrow query set up. If things aren't done from the previous day, they will show up there. One additional layer worth noting here, I'll go back into the day configuration. I also, in those queries, will specify that I want things that are, and I'm just typing this in capitals, not done. That works to filter out anything that has already been done in advance. Occasionally, I'll get something knocked out before it's scheduled, and so I don't want to see that. If I type not done and include that as part of the query, that will do that. Oh, also, one last thing here. Sorry, I forgot to mention this. In the to-do configuration, if you go down to advanced, so I did that kind of quickly. If I click on to-do and open its configuration, I can choose to show it as a checkbox. And that way, all my to-dos will show up with checkboxes. And I could just mark them off. I should have done that sooner, but I forgot. And now because I have the live query there that says not done, if they get clicked off like I just did, they won't show up anymore. So they'll disappear if you have them set up that way. Do I need an or to include overdue? I could use the same query to include an overdue. Yes, that's correct, Brian. If I wanted to use the same query, Ivy asking the same question there, you could use an or to include overdue in the same with the today's. I have them as separate just because that's the way I originally set it up, and I actually like seeing them separate. But there's no reason that you couldn't alter the today's task query to have an or statement that would then also say looking for these or looking for overdue. That would work just fine. That would work fine. I'm not going to walk through that at the moment, but we can walk through that as part of the questions later if we want to. Okay, so that gets us from the basics of a to-do up to having a simple agenda, just simply tasks that are listed on the day of what we have going on here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the tomorrow page where we have these original things knocked out here, and move on to the next step here. So in AP Productivity, and in general, I think with most productivity, we want to have more ways than just scheduling a task to be able to see those tasks. So we need a little bit more information that can be added to a to-do tag to make that viable, to make that work. So let's re-enter our to-do configuration and let's add a new thing. I call this horizons. So this is a new field. And horizons means essentially the distance away from being scheduled that a task may be. And I think they'll make sense when I give you the names of them here. So I created a field that was the greater than sign, shift period on my keyboard. I'm going to call it horizons, and we're creating this field here. Okay. And now I'm going to click on, watch, this is something I haven't done yet, so watch closely here. I'm going to click on this little green, it's green because I'm in a to-do, it won't be green necessarily. Horizons, right next to it, there's a little box here that has a thing, and I'm going to click on that because I don't want horizons to just be anything. I want it to be a list of fixed options. So I'm going to click on anything down here, and then I'm going to click on fixed options. And when I click on the fixed options, you'll notice it comes up with an opportunity here to add some of those options. So the options I'm going to add are scheduled, which if I call something scheduled, that means I already have a due date attached to it. I'm going to have one called this week. That's the kind of tasks that I want to accomplish this week, but haven't necessarily scheduled for an agenda yet. I'm going to have one called available. Those are tasks that could be done anytime. If I have some free time or something like that, I can go find an available task to do. And then I have tasks that are deferred, meaning I have put a date on them that I want to review them later, but I don't want to see them right now. And I have for myself what I call delayed. And I actually have a little bit more than this, but this is enough to get going with. It's actually probably more than you need to get going with, but it's a good layer. Delayed just means for me, I'm not going to review that until some recurring action tells me to review it in a month or 2 or 3. So I don't want to see it as something that's available. It'll do that. And what you may already be kind of surmising as you see me adding this kind of content here is that you as you watched me query the to-dos in order to get the date, you may have recognized that we're going to use queries to find the right sort of tasks that we want to see and when for this as well. This gives us leverage. These fields give us things that we can use to more accurately narrow down the kind of tasks that we want to look at. So we've added this horizons now, and this now will show up with every to-do. And that includes the ones that we have already created. So if I were to go, let's actually go back to today's date where I created them. And if I were to look underneath here, you would see now horizons already exists. That's there. I can choose from, if I choose this drop down over here, I can choose from the list that I just created. So this one I have scheduled already, but let's go ahead and knock that date out of there. So I'm deleting that node with the date, and I'm going to call this instead a task I want to do this week. The dog may complain, but that's on the dog. And then this cat is going to be very hungry because I'm just going to change this to available. Okay. We do have a cat. We keep her bowl full, I promise. So these are our examples here of things that we can use. I would want to review for myself my this week tasks. I actually want to review. I want to see those every day because that's how I make sure that I could include one of them. I could go ahead and schedule it for a date if I wanted to. If I want to be able to view those every day, I need to similarly use a query to be able to find them. Let's create that in the day tag. List of day, no, configure, there we go. We'll create a query here, Command K or Control K, that finds nodes. Once again, we want tag to do because we're still working from to do. But in this case, we don't want it we don't want to find a due date. We want to find the field horizons. And you'll notice when you're working through find nodes here, all this context sensitive stuff shows up automatically. I just created horizons and it's already here because it shows up immediately. Tana knows, which is really fun. And it'll also know all of the options that have, this one only allows you to choose the things that have been chosen so far, it looks like, but I can start searching for them. And I can say things that are this week, this are available. So we have them chosen. If something that exists that way, it'll show them up. So I'll say for this particular one, I want to see things that are tagged this week. And for the moment, let's go ahead and save that as a list. I'll show you some other options here. And you'll see, I'm still in the configuration right now, but you'll see when we get out to the main screen here, if I were to look at that, I already have those in all of my day tags. If I were to go to tomorrow, say the next day here. Nothing's in today anymore because remember I took the dates off of those in the other, but down here in this nodes tag to do, you can see that walk the dog exists in there. And if I were to take run a marathon from this page and do the same with it, we'll go ahead and delete the date and call it a this week. It will show up within that as well. So now one thing worth noting, let me go back to today's page and turn feed the cat back into a task for the tomorrow here. And we'll call it scheduled as we do that. And you'll notice you can choose from the drop down. You can also just start typing. That's how I normally choose these things, because it's a lot quicker. It'll auto complete and you can very quickly add things that way. So if I now go to my tomorrow, I have some things that are in the today's task. I have some things that are down here in the this week. And what I do when I'm preparing an agenda is I'll take my today tasks and my this week tasks. The day tasks I bring into the day. This week I decide what I want to bring in. Let me talk about what I mean by bring in. Okay, I'm going to go back into the day tag very briefly. Clicking on the day tag, configuring it. I'm going to add one layer to this here. I'm going to go up to the top here. I'm going to add the word agenda. And then I'm going to indent each of these one level. Okay. And the reason I'm doing that is, and I don't know if this is something that will continue to be the case or it'll be a little bit different going on. But the problem is if I want to move things around that are part of the super tag, which is what we're looking at here when I say the configuration of day. Day is now a super tag that has all this stuff associated with it. If I want to move things around, they can't be on the very top level of the super tag. They can be one level indented or further, but they can't be at the very top level. So if I want to be able to maneuver around with the things that I found in those, I have to do it this way. Okay. So now if you come back up here, you'll see the top level says agenda. And this is on here because I added this previously. So let me go ahead and knock out everything but the run a marathon, because that's living there. So now if I now open this, now you'll see here are my today's tasks. Oops, sorry, I hit the wrong button there. What have I done? Why did it do that? It's in there. It's in the live query here. It should be working just fine. What did I do to knock that out of there? Let me. Am I doing something wrong here? I'm confused. Okay, it's working fine on Wednesday. I'm not sure what I did here on Tuesday. But anyway, my query for these are up here. We'll pretend this is the Tuesday page. Sorry about that. I'm not 100% sure what I did there, but I'm going to go on just for the sake of it here. If I set this for Tuesday's information, I'll get the information that the feed the cat. I'll still have my this week tags underneath here. And I can use Shift Tab when I'm on this task. Shift Tab will actually create a reference to it directly in the agenda. And let's say I decided I wanted to go ahead and walk the dog today. I can create Shift Tab. I can use that to pull that directly into my agenda. That did require the extra level of indentation. So at this point, I have a few different ways of getting things onto the agenda. I can then delete the searches because I don't need those. And I just have the tasks remaining. They're references. They have the dotted lines around them. And they have their associated information underneath them. If I needed to take any additional notes there, I could. Okay, so I'm still not 100% sure what I did to Tuesday back there, but we'll not worry about it for the moment. This is working just fine here, and it's always worked just fine in my main, so I'm not worried about that. All right, so there's this much so far. I see I have a couple questions here. Eric says he thinks it's a bug that's doing that. And Kelly, the reason I have the searches nested under the agenda is because I want to be able to do that Shift Tab move. But when you're in a super tag or the stuff that's related to a super tag, you can't move around the things that are on the very top level. So nesting one level deeper allows me to be able to move things around once I've done. I can Shift Tab the tasks back, and then I can move them up and down, and I can do things like that. You can't move things around that are living directly on the top level of the super tag thing. Yes. Okay. So that's that. Okay. So let's go one more piece of demo here. and I'm going a little longer than I meant to, but that's okay. I think it's important to cover it all here. I'm not going to talk about recurring tasks in this one unless it comes up in the questions at the end. We'll do a separate thing on recurrence here, just so that you have that. At some point, but we won't do it here in this session. I want to show you, though, how I get these tasks associated with not necessarily just a day, but with other related tasks. And we'll use bins and projects to show this. So let's imagine, and I'll just do this on a daily page here. Let's imagine that we wanted to have a place for these tasks to live so that they're not necessarily living on a just as a thing that's arriving in the agenda, but we want them to be able to live inside with other related tasks, whether that be part of a project or just tasks that are related by category. The bottom level of that is what I call at AP Productivity a bin. You can have a bin that might cover a certain area of responsibility, or a bin that might cover a certain role that you play in your life. We're going to create a tag, a super tag for bin. Okay, so let me create it, bin, bin. And now I have a super tag for bin. And I'm going to create a couple of bins here for you. One I'm going to call capture and dispatch, which is my term for what in GTD or getting things done would be called an inbox. Effectively, it's short-term working memory. You have an idea, you need to get something in there, you can create a task for it and pop it in this bin, which I'll show you how to do momentarily. Another might be home and auto. Let's say we have home and auto, things that need to be done around the house. They aren't related to any specific projects, but they related to our cars and our house. I tag that bin as well. And then let's say we need to do something that are, work tasks. And now some of your tasks at work are no doubt related to projects. Some of them are probably just one-off things that you need to do once. We'll create a bin for those one-off things that you need to do that you don't need to worry about otherwise. That way, you don't need a whole separate project for, one or two things that are just need to be done and don't relate to any particular project. Okay, so we've created 3 bins. How do we get tasks? How do we get our to-dos to show up in those bins? This is the RJ Nestor initial philosophy attempt of how to deal with these things in Tana, and that is that our relationships propagate upward. Okay, I'll say that again. Relationships propagate upward, meaning if I want a relationship between a particular to-do and a particular bin, in other words, I want the to-do to be in that bin, I need to make that relationship a property of the task, not the bin. So if I want the to-do to show up in the bin, I need some sort of property in that to-do that builds the relationship to the bin. Let me show you what I mean. Let's imagine, it's not really imagining, around the home is where I would be walking the dog. So in our to-do here, let's actually create our space for relating to that bin. I'm going to create a new field. I call this field list in my own thing, so that's what I'll call it here. I'm going to create the field, which means, again, greater than sign, shift period. We're going to call it list. That's a new field, so we'll create that. And then just like I did with horizons, I'm going to click on the little box next to it, which happens to be green because I made to-dos green. And instead of choosing anything or fixed options, I'm going to choose something called instance. An instance will ask me for the source super tag. Over here, there's a drop down from that source super tag. I'm going to choose bin. Okay, and I had several versions of bin there because I've been working with that in other graphs here. But I want the one that's associated with this one. So now I've created this list instance of bin, and we're almost there now because having done this, you basically have all the setup you need. The only thing left to do is within bin, configure the bin so that there's a search for the to-dos that are in that bin. So I need to find node. This is the same thing I did on the day. Sorry, my finger slipped there and I hit the wrong button on the mouse. Find nodes with tag. Still look at to-dos. Remember, they propagate upward, so it's a property of the to-do. And then we want a field that is a list that is this bin. So the parent bin is what we want. And if we have to, parent sometimes, as I say, works and sometimes doesn't work perfectly. If we have to change it to the specific bin, we can. But so this is set up that way. So now every one of these bins will have in it that search. Okay, you can see it's each got list of nodes tag to do with list parent is in there. And if I want to make that a little bit prettier looking, I can just I'll go back into the configuration. Instead of this being called list of nodes tag to do with list parent, we can just change the name of it. Sorry, I didn't mean to select everything there. We can just call it tasks. And now these are the tasks that live in that bin. And you'll see they're all called tasks. At the moment, there won't be anything in them because I haven't assigned any to-dos that way. But if, let's say, walk the dog is something that I believe should belong to the list home and auto, all I have to do is start typing home and auto right here, and you'll see, because it knows what this is, it can automatically bring that up. Okay, I will click on home and auto, and as I say, nope, it is working. I close it and open it, and walk the dog now has appeared in my home and auto bin. Okay, so each of those now those tasks can show up very easily wherever I may want them to be. I don't know why it would be a work task, but let's pretend that feed the cat is a work task. And you'll see that shows up automatically. And once we rerun this query here, you can see that feed the cat is now showing up in the work bin. The question that generally arises at this point in Tana, especially since everything is a node, is okay, yes, but where do I want these bins to be? Where do I put them? The answer is twofold. One, wherever you want, because once you tag them bin, they'll function as a bin. But if you want to have one place to look for them, you can very easily go up to the top level of your graph here. Let's say go to the very top of AP Productivity Demos. And I could create a search node up here that finds all of my bins, find nodes with tag bin, and we'll just create them as a list right now. And having done that, literally every bin that I have anywhere in the system is visible to me up here. Okay, I've changed that to say just bins. This is, and I know I'm moving a little bit faster now, but the searches combined with the fields are why Tana is just so wildly powerful. And notice I've been talking now for about 35 minutes or so. And I've already got a way to create these tasks, to schedule these tasks, to put them in places, and all of it's customized. All of these bins can be things of my own, and I don't have to worry about anything being super complicated to make that happen. Okay. One last thing I'm going to talk about before I open up for questions here. And that is, so let's imagine that I have a project that is a little bit more than a bin. It's not just related tasks that happen to be in the home. It's tasks that are not only related, but they're all pulling toward the same outcome. It's an actual full-fledged, what you would call a project. How would I get tasks onto a project list? And the way I do that, let me go back to today's page here in this, so that I can demo this on the page rather than having it at the top level. The way that I do that is by creating a project tag that, and I'm going to use a fancy term here and then demonstrate it, extends bins. So if I create a project tag, I've just now created a project tag, and I configure it. I'll turn it orange so you can see the differentiation of it here. I don't have to add anything here yet. I can add more there as I feel the need to. But down here under advanced, if I click extend an existing tag, and I choose the tag I want to extend, in this case bin, now it'll include already anything that bin includes. It includes tasks up here. If I want to create a new field that is only here related to project, let's say I wanted to create something where I call this purpose. Let's say that when I have a project, I want to have the purpose of the project. So I now have a thing that each project will have task list and then purpose, but bins will only have the task list. And having done just that, let's create a project called Rebuild My System in Tana. Okay, so I now have a project called that if I go underneath here, I can see where any task that may be associated with it or what its purpose may be. If I take a task that says learn how to do to-dos in Tana, I make that a to-do. I come down into this, and there's actually an even quicker way of doing this, but I'll save that for the moment here. Come down here into the list, and I start searching for rebuild. You'll notice that because project extends bin, it can also be added directly to that. So I don't even have to do anything different. It's the same list field I just created a little bit ago, and still looking for instances of bin, but in this particular case, it finds projects too, because projects in the logistics of this are a type of bin, which is maybe stretching the definition slightly, but it doesn't stretch the implementation. And I come up here to the tasks, you'll see that those tasks automatically show up in here. So that gets us through from the absolute fundamental of not having to-dos even built to being able to create a category or a project and move tasks into that. And now, of course, I hope those of you who are on this call directly here also have access or can have access to the graph, the shared graph where I'm building this. So it's now, granted, I built a little bit of chaos here, but we can clean that up as we go so you can see what those pieces are. You can come in, you can look at that, you can play with that a little bit and get a sense of how those relationships are working. What I did not cover, and you may ask in some questions here, if we go a little over time, we can, that's fine. What I didn't cover was recurrence. I didn't cover recurring tasks. I didn't cover what I call procedures. I didn't cover recipes, which is what I call project templates. And I didn't do those because that's another separate entity in itself. Not super complex, but enough different from what we're doing here. There's a little extra logic to layer in. I wanted to start with this because I felt that it was a smoother, sort of a smooth way to look at fundamentals of AP productivity, fundamentals of how AP productivity could be done in Tana, and also just Tana fundamentals in general. How do you even create a field? How do you change the type of field that it is? I would talk in another session also about task contexts. So how you can group tasks into location or with whom you're doing those tasks, so you can be more effective at choosing what to do when. And I didn't talk about logging in this. Logging is a big part, as you know, of what I do with my system. So I think that that's something that's worth doing, but it's not something that I've done here. And I see that Tracy has asked the question, unlike traditional daily note page structure, Tana's is much more about building a dashboard. We add text tasks or notes directly into relevant nodes. I think for myself, even with Rome, I would have called what I built with a smart block largely a dashboard too. I don't think what I'm doing in Tana, for me at least conceptually, is a whole lot different. But that said, I take what you're saying, because by building it as a super tag and including the queries in that mix, it is very much building a dashboard. I think I already thought of it that way in Rome, but if you didn't think of it that way, yes, I think so. You can always use this area below the line. You'll see that line is created there. You can always, it looks like today is at least, we're going to happen to that tomorrow but you have this here. So anything you add to the page directly that does not need to be, it is not part of the super tag, can still be done. You can still just add things as you go. And I do that a lot for when I'm creating new tasks or something. You can add those down below. I actually use the quick capture, but that quick capture adds them down below. So it's something there that you can still do that, but the dashboard portion, what you're calling dashboard, yes, can live as part of the super tag, and you can draw things in as you need to for that. Yes, and I agree, Eric, it is quite a bit to take in. And could I show again how to do overdue tasks? So what I do with overdue tasks is just use the systems search. Since I use the due date field that comes with Tana, the example being here, you can see this, it's purple because Tana does it. The overdue tasks is a query that is literally just searching for things. Again, this is system overdue in big capital letters, tells it it's using its own system thing, things that are overdue and things that are to-dos. I would add to that mix not done also in big capital letters, because I have noticed sometimes it is wise enough to recognize that, sometimes it doesn't. So that just catches that for you if you need to. But it's just a query that allows you to search it that way. so that you can it's using the system tools. So I don't have to even build in yeah, it's not a field, it's a thing like that. So so a system field, IV, is one that comes with it. Is it possible to create a system field? I don't think that we have the power to do that. I'm sure that a ton of people do. But it's not really relevant. You don't really need to create a system field, because once you have created your own field, it is effectively a system field. You can reuse it all over the place. So if I have a field, called list here that I wanted to put somewhere else for some reason, I can put that anywhere, and it'll still be the same field that I used in to do. I could put that field somewhere else with the same parameters if I want to. So it doesn't come built in with Tana, but once you've created it, it is effectively built in. Okay. How do I use it somewhere else? When you start creating it, it'll give you a drop down. So let's say I am in here, and you can actually, I only showed you creating fields and super tags, but you can create a field anywhere. If I create a field here and I start typing list, you'll see that one of those the first things that's chosen there is that it's a field from elsewhere. So it's functioning exactly the same as the system fields as far as that's concerned. Once you've created it, you can recreate it anywhere. Okay. So and so we've had questions kind of running as we go here. But let me actually officially, having said what we did do here and having said what I didn't do here, let's stop and take any questions that you may have, and allow you to share your screen if you need to share your screen. I'm going to stop my share just for the moment here. I'll reshare as needed. What kind of questions does this raise? Is this helpful? What kind of things did I not cover that you would like me to cover in this moment? More than happy to do that. I would explain. I see in the chat here. The question was, can I explain how parent works? I can explain how I think parent ought to work. Meaning, in theory, the idea with parent is that it will always grab whatever node you're indented under. That will be the node that parent refers to. I say that the reason I was a little snarky about my response is sometimes it seems to work for me and sometimes it doesn't. So I don't know whether that's a ton of bug. I mean, we are very much still in early access, or something I am misunderstanding. That's why I laugh at, can I explain how parent works? Theoretically, I think I ought to be able to, but I'm not sure I can, because sometimes it doesn't seem to work the way I expect it to. But the idea is that if I create, it functions like this might function in programming or something like that. It becomes a reference to the one level up node is the idea. So theoretically, if I create a task search that searches for things that are to-dos, and also related, like the list is the parent of this, theoretically that means anytime I create a new bin or a new project, it's already built in that it will search for the one for this particular task that are associated with this particular list. I have had occasionally to just hard code in what the specific project or bin is. Now, mind you, that takes 2 seconds to choose this, the actual correct list from the list. So it's not that big of a deal that the parent doesn't always work for me. Once I spot it's not working, I just fix it. I don't have so many projects that it would take me more than a minute to do that with all of them. But just be aware that that's parent. And it's probably something I'm doing wrong and misunderstanding, but parent in theory will do what I described there. Is that helpful? Yeah. Other questions, other things I can demo for you here. Did everything I showed here make sense? I attempted to move it at a speed that would do that. Ivy asks, can I talk about how I use log and agenda as the same node? Yeah, let me actually just share over my own screen here. So this is my. I know I'm not currently sharing. I will come back to sharing here momentarily. I'm just going to my personal page here, and before I share it over, I'm just making sure there's nothing overly personal in the mix here. No, that's all fine. Okay, so I'm going to share my own. This is my primary Tana graph here, and I have a header I call agenda, and log. The agenda populates effectively the same way I just showed you. I have a few more layers of things that I didn't show as part of a simplistic demo, but nothing dramatically different. Functionally, it's like that. The only thing that I do as I go, let's say here, my my daughter is selling. Ceres is a local chocolate company here south of Pittsburgh. So I don't know if I can now take sponsorship money from Ceres. I'll see if I can do that. But Ceres is delicious candies. They do a lot of fundraising kind of things. My daughter's selling Ceres for her dance studio. My church choir is a frequent purchaser of those Ceres candies. And so I need to take pictures of the Ceres candies forms to send to them so tomorrow night when I see them, they can order them. I just say that so you understand what I'm talking about. Okay? If I this is how I log things. First of all, I bring them out of I have it time blocked to the 12 o'clock. I pull it back one level so it's no longer underneath that and move it up into place. And I have a tag that I call logged. And let's look at what this has in it right now. This is a take pictures of Sarah's candies. You can see it's scheduled for, it was actually scheduled for yesterday. And so I brought this in via an overdue. And it's in my bin family work. Okay, so you can all see this is exactly what I just showed you. I have a couple other layers here. I haven't ever used DO date yet. It's one that I'm experimenting with. And I do use context, but this one I didn't feel necessary to state home because I already had it scheduled, so I didn't need an additional layer of context to help me with it. Okay, so that's what's there right now. When I add the tag logged, what you'll see happens is it adds a start time and an end time. And so once I'm ready to do it, I choose log. I use the start time. I use Command or Control K to just enter the current time for start. And then I start working on it. I take the pictures, I do my things, I do whatever. When I'm done with it, I use the exact same thing to enter the end time. And now it's all done. I do one additional layer. Because I have my log tag set up to display in a certain way that to do prevents from being visible, I actually at the end, and notice that my cursor is up inside this here. At the end, I use that same Command or Control K to choose remove tag, and I remove the to do tag. And then that then lets the log display show up, and I hit Command Enter a couple times or Control Enter a couple times, and it shows up with the little checkbox in it, which helps it also then show as grayed out. So it's actually very smooth in terms of the transition. For instance, I have this referral to enter in for BNI, and notice, by the way, you may have all noted this already, but a lot of times you feel like, oh, I need to be at the very end of the line to start typing a hashtag. Actually, you can be literally anywhere in the line. If I'm in the middle of the word referral here with my cursor, if I start typing logged, it's going to show up correctly and it's going to tag it as logged. So it doesn't matter where your cursor is. You can do it from anywhere. And so now underneath logged, again, I would add the start time here, insert current time. I would do the thing. And then when I'm done, I would log the end time. This time I didn't remember to bring it up, but I can do that easily. And then I will remove the tag to do. And now it's shown up as finished. Now, mind you, I don't, as I've said in the course, I don't always log every single thing. Some of these, when they're small things, I may just go check down the list and not worry about actually adding the log start time and end time. Sometimes I group them together into something that I might log the overarching group, but not the individual things. But that's the mechanic. And so when I do this one, hashtag logged, drop it, start time, do it, blah, 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 end time, close it up, and then I'll remove the to-do tag. I'll hit the right button to do that, and do that. So it adds 6-7 seconds of mechanics in order to change it into a log. Now, I'm not necessarily saying for everybody that you need to create what I'm calling a destructive log, meaning my agenda disappears into my log. You may find that for yourself, you want to have them as separate things so that you can compare. I that's never been something that's been particularly valuable to me, meaning compare like what you meant to do with what you actually wound up doing, so you can learn that over time. I found over time that I'm pretty comfortable with that, and seeing what I did is enough for me when I'm done. And let me, I'll undo all of these since I didn't actually do any of those things yet. Is that what this was all about, Ivy? Were you trying to get it so I would forget to take the pictures of the Sarah's candies? I knew it. I knew it. So now all that's undone. And undo on for the record, undo is a really very successful in Tana. It'll undo a lot. It'll undo basically anything, any opening, closing of things, moving to another page, all that kind of stuff, all fits under undo. Other questions or things that you'd like answers to? If you want to demo a screen that you have and have kind of talk about something you're struggling with, that's also fine.
Hi, RJ.
Yes, Pam.
I have a question. I noticed that when you log your to-do, the start and end time appear at the beginning of the. How do you do that?
It's funny to say I have that set up automatically and then just never tell you how it's done. That's how I prefer to do things, Pam. If you don't mind, I'm going to demo things and then never tell you how they're done. No, I'll show you here how it is. My cruelty doesn't extend quite so far as that. Okay, so with this in the logged tag here, if you go to configure and then you go down to advanced, you can build title from fields, meaning then I have a start time, I have an end time. I can use this $ and then the curly brackets to insert start time, $ and curly brackets to insert the end time, and I put a hyphen there in between as well. And then $ curly bracket with name, and name is just whatever you have typed in the node. So it isn't a field per se, but it is a placeholder for whatever's typed in the node. And you can do this with a lot of different things. I have events that use automatic naming as well. But so it's in the logged tag, and it's then in advanced, build title from fields. And at that point, you can use this $ curly brace structure to make it so that you can use the fields there, or you can use a placeholder to the what's in the field or what's in the node itself.
Hey, RJ, can I ask you a question on that?
You certainly can.
It appeared, and maybe I saw it wrong, but it appeared that it didn't do that until you removed the to-do.
That is correct. And that's because the to-do was in conflict with that. There is no naming convention on the to-do. So when there is a conflict, it won't fire the automatic build.
Oh, that's cool. Actually, that's helpful because then it forces you to remember to remove the to-do.
It does that for me, yes. And now, since removing to-do is literally a 1 second process.
Yeah, of course.
Yes. So, and Tracy's saying still way back there with how I set up the ability for one node to have 2 tags. Well, I mean, I use multiple tags on nodes often. Now sometimes as with the log one, I will then remove another one. But there are, like for instance, is it weird to say that I have my wife in my system as a person and also as a BNI member, but not as like spouse? I didn't need a separate field for spouse, but my wife has multiple tags because she happens to be in the same BNI chapter that I'm in, and one of them is person and one of them is BNI member. Now, person is one of those tags that can be extended to BNI members. I wouldn't actually have to have that separately, but you can imagine a scenario where she would be, 2 different types of person. Like if I were to create, for instance, family member that extended off of person, well, one can be both a family member and also a BNI member. And there's no real reason you can't have both those tags. So as long as there's a reason to have, the things that are arriving with multiple tags, if the information brought by different super tags, it's perfectly logical to use multiple tags there. Can I show what configuration I have for event? I can, and yes, it does use the same start time and end time, Kelly, as logged. Yes, I have. So I have the event name, I have the date the event's occurring, I have a start time and end time, and then I have location. I have not actually ever used location because pretty much everything I've used so far has been on the computer, but theoretically I could. And then I use the same build, except instead of using name, I use event name for that. I will tell you, I've been fiddling with how I have this set up, mainly because of some of the things I want to extend it with. Like I extend it with a meeting, but the problem is if I've previously created it as an event and then I want to call it a meeting, it can be awkward. Like, where do I type the name? I have a little friction with the naming process, so I'm iterating on whether I want to use event name or whether I just want to type a name directly in the node. But functionally speaking, it's using exactly the same fields as the other one is, and it's building essentially the same flow, except I'm using the event name field for building the name, if that's helpful. Other questions, other thoughts, other things that may be issues you need to explore? And of course, here at the end, we got into some things that are, I mean, maybe not complex, but definitely my own sort of layer of how I built it. The previous things, the things we started with here today, I may not be so bold as to say that is the way to do it in Tana, but it's certainly a very simple and effective way. As if you can start with a to-do, and everything that you need, any list you might need to put it on, any day you might need it to show up on, any distance from now, that horizon that it might need to be, if you can make those properties of the to-do, then the searches become really, really powerful and also relatively straightforward. I didn't show yet, an additional layer above that is, well, I could then organize all my projects by what status they're in, if they're an idea, if they're in development, if they're in the planning phases, if they're actually in production, whatever. And Tana can allow you to view that in a Kanban board and move those things around. So if you think in terms of those properties being able to kind of propagate upward, I think everything can follow from that. I'm glad to hear that, Tracy. Brian, I saw you popped off of mute there.
Yeah, I understand how you created bins, but would you go over again, or maybe you didn't even do it. How did you create a project that is more complex than a bin so that you can assign tasks to it as well?
Yes.
In other words, when you create a to-do, I want to see not only bins, but more complex projects.
Okay, so what you saw me demo was just simply the creation of a project as an extension of bin, so that I could then add the to-dos to that in the same way. And at that part I demoed. The part I didn't demo was adding a lot more different fields to projects, only because that part was I was just saving a little time there. But let me do that now. That's perfectly fine. So
actually, what I was hoping is that you would be able to create a secondary template that could be used for additional real projects.
Gotcha. Okay, and that was one of the things I mentioned at the beginning or not the beginning, but like as I was finishing up the first part of the demo. Yeah, okay. Recurrence. I want to do that as a separate entity because I think recurring tasks and procedures and what I call recipes, those project templates, all fall under the same category of things that are blueprints for live versions, if you will. So a recurring task is a blueprint for a scheduled task. A procedure is a blueprint for something that you're going to be doing in the flow of some other thing. So that was the only reason I didn't dive into that today. Yes, correct. Okay. But I will say in the course, I talk about that in the week 3, we're on week 3, right? Yeah, week 3 videos. I mention the concept of recipe. So I want to make sure we do get into that implementation here soon in Tana. I thought that it was wise to stay with what I would call maybe first order structures because when we get to the things that are blueprints for first order structures, I think we're then in sort of that second tier, if you will, structure, which is critical and a huge part of what we're doing, but an extra layer of sort of conceptual complexity in terms of building that out. If that makes sense. At least that was my thinking. Carol has said, I have a status field in tasks, which has to do and done, as well as the others. But how does the system know when I pick done, it is a done task? It doesn't unless you create your searches that are built around that. It wouldn't. Now, it does automatically know. I came in part way, Carol. If you're using the command or control enter to cycle from checkboxes that are no checkbox to having a checkbox to having a filled checkbox, same as you would have in Rome. That is recognized as a version of done. So if you use that as opposed to creating a separate field for it, it would automatically recognize that as a version of done. If you create a separate field for it, and there's no reason you can't, all that means is if you created a query, I don't know why that became a multiple syllable thing, that like 97 query syllable word. If you created a query for your to-dos in any particular case, you would just want to make sure that that query included, if as needed, the awareness of whether something was done in that query. So you could then use the field that you created as one of the parameters for the query.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I haven't been doing, so I should do that.
There you go. That'll do it.
Thank you.
No problem. Other things. I know, Adam, that you have your young child there who's not feeling well. Any question? Did this help some with that implementation of what we're doing? And maybe you're not even there at the moment. I'm hopeful that it did. Yes, excellent. Yay! I'm glad to hear that. I truly appreciate your all's patience with getting to the point where we can do that. And I know, yes, I know that there's a lot to break down, so you'll want to watch the replay. But I too was figuring out what's the best way to implement this in Tana. And I shy away from words like best because, as we iterate, who knows what best means. But for sure, this has proven to be an exceptionally functional way, and the simple version that I gave you here is really almost exactly what I'm using. I have some additional layers. I have the recurrence and stuff that we'll talk about, but in terms of the basic functionality, that's what I'm doing, and it's working really well. So, which is quite encouraging.
Can I cycle back a second, please?
Of course.
I did the command enter
Mm-hmm.
on the task that I'd done. And rather than put a checkbox, it's just put a line through it, like a strike through.
Yes, it does that. You know what? It does that for certain done states, and I don't know when or why. I'm sorry.
I'm assuming it'll do the same purpose.
I've seen the behavior, but I'm not sure what I haven't fiddled enough to figure out what the reason for it is. I know that it does that actually. If I have a to do that is marked done, and then I remove the to-do tag, it defaults to that line through. So I don't know. I have seen that, but I don't know exactly what the behind the scenes logic is that they're using to determine when to put a line through it versus when to put a checkbox on it. Sorry, not a super helpful answer, but
no, that's fine. It just confused me slightly when it did it. I was thinking, where's the checkbox?
Excellent. Other questions? We will have. I think I'm probably going to just schedule for the same thing next Monday, after we've gotten through it, and just make maybe 3 or 4 of these on the Mondays, so we can have a time to specifically talk the Tana implementation. Of course, you're always welcome to ask specific Tana questions in the office hours, or in the community. There's no reason you can't do that. But the time to sort of do the specialized demo, the recurring action one, I am going to dive into it in the demo. But the system that I posted in the Tana part of the community is there. That's what I'm using for recurring tasks. So if you wanted to kind of have a look at that, I didn't do quite as extensive a demo as I did with this here, but it should probably get you in the ballpark if you haven't looked at that yet. And then we can talk about like how we can encode procedures and how we can, talk about what Brian was asking about with the project templates and things like that, which is, I think, not that it's complex or anything, but that it does require a sort of second layer of logic, because you're creating the first order things as opposed to from those things, as opposed to just doing it directly. All right. I'm going to assume, with no further questions that we can shut down for today. I'm glad it was helpful, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions in any other format. And we'll reconvene and do this again soon.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.